The detective slid a photograph across the table. Blood on a car seat, dark and already drying at the edges. "Your sister's blood type matches this sample exactly," he said. "We need to prepare you for the possibility that this isn't a simple disappearance." I stared at the photo, my hands trembling around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. My sister, Ivy, had vanished 11 days earlier. Her car found abandoned on a shoulder off Route 9, the driver's window shattered, no sign of her anywhere. "Find her," I said. "Whatever it costs, whatever you need, find her." I had no idea, saying those words, how literally I meant them, or how completely I'd regret them 3 months later, when I discovered exactly where that blood had actually come from. My name is Odette Marsh. I'm 39, a mid-level project manager at a logistics firm outside Columbus, Ohio. I spent 11 years quietly saving toward my first home down payment. This is the story of how my sister spent every dollar of it, convincing an entire town, an entire police department, and me that she'd been kidnapped, when in reality, she'd simply run. Before the disappearance. Ivy was 7 years younger than me, the kind of sister who'd always run a little hot, a little reckless, in ways our parents found charming when we were kids and increasingly exhausting as adults. She'd bounced between jobs throughout her 20s, waitressing, a brief stint in real estate, a failed attempt at starting an online boutique that left her with credit card debt she never fully disclosed to any of us. I loved her fiercely despite all of it, the way you love a sibling whose mess always somehow becomes partially your responsibility. "You worry too much about me," she told me once, laughing off my concern about a boyfriend who'd struck me as controlling. "I always land on my feet, Odie. I always figure it out." I believed her, mostly because I wanted to. Ivy had a gift for making chaos look temporary, like something she'd simply outgrow eventually. The debt I didn't know about. What none of us knew, not our parents, not me, was that Ivy had spent the previous 2 years borrowing money from increasingly dangerous sources to cover losses from a cryptocurrency scheme she'd gotten pulled into by a man she'd been dating. The debts started small, informal loans from acquaintances, then escalated into borrowing from a private lender operating well outside any legal framework. The kind of arrangement that comes with interest rates designed to trap people permanently, rather than help them recover. By the time she disappeared, Ivy owed nearly $90,000 to a man named Dale Perrin, a figure I wouldn't learn about until months later. A man whose collection methods apparently involved considerably more than polite phone calls. She never said a word, my mother told me later, devastated by how completely Ivy had hidden the extent of her financial spiral. Not one word to any of us. The night she disappeared. Ivy had called me around 9 on a Thursday evening, her voice slightly off, distracted in a way I attributed at the time to stress from a recent breakup. "I might need to borrow some money soon," she said. "Nothing crazy, just enough to get current on a few things." "How much?" I asked. "I'll let you know," she said. "I love you, Odie. You know that, right?" The call ended abruptly, and I didn't think much of it at the time, assuming she'd call back once she'd figured out an actual number. She never called back. Her car was found the next morning, abandoned on Route 9, roughly 40 minutes from her apartment, the driver's side window shattered into a spiderweb of cracks, dark stains visible on the seat. The investigation begins. Detective Marcus Ruiz caught the case, a methodical man in his 50s who'd clearly handled disappearances before, though rarely ones with this specific combination of evidence. "The blood on the seat is a significant amount," he told our family during the first briefing, 3 days after Ivy vanished. "Enough to suggest a violent struggle, though not necessarily fatal blood loss. The broken window is consistent with forced entry, someone breaking in from outside rather than Ivy breaking it herself." "Do you have any leads?" my father asked, his voice tight with a fear none of us had experienced before. "We're pursuing several angles," Ruiz said carefully, "including her recent relationship history and any financial disputes she may have had." I remember feeling a flicker of unease at that phrase, financial disputes, but grief and panic overwhelmed any deeper questioning at the time. I simply wanted my sister found, alive, whatever the explanation for her disappearance turned out to be. Organizing the search. Within days, I'd become the de facto coordinator of Ivy's search effort, a role I fell into naturally given my organizational instincts from years of project management work. I created a missing persons flyer, distributed it across social media, contacted local news stations, organized volunteer search parties along Route 9 and the surrounding wooded areas. My savings account, the one I'd built meticulously over 11 years toward a home down payment, became the funding source for nearly everything. I need to hire a private investigator, I told my parents 2 weeks in, frustrated with what felt like slow progress from the police department. Someone who can dig deeper than official channels allow. I hired a man named Griffin Adair, a former state trooper turned private investigator with a reputation for finding people who didn't want to be found, or in this case, people I desperately believed had been taken against their will. The cost of searching. Griffin's retainer alone cost $12,000. I offered a public reward for information leading to Ivy's safe return, another $15,000, raised partially through a crowdfunding campaign I organized alongside my own contribution. Search dogs, additional flyers, gas money for volunteers combing rural roads for weeks, a billboard I paid to have erected on the highway near where her car was found. The costs accumulated faster than I tracked them, each expense justified in the moment by a singular, overwhelming need to bring my sister home. "You're spending your entire savings," my husband Tio told me gently one night, reviewing our joint accounts with visible concern. "I understand why. I just need you to know what this is costing us." "She's my sister," I said. "I'll rebuild the savings later. I can't rebuild her if we don't find her in time." Tio didn't argue further. He understood, or at least accepted, that logic wasn't going to override grief in that particular moment. The community response. The town rallied in ways that still move me to remember, even now, knowing what I eventually learned. Neighbors organized search parties every weekend. Local businesses donated food and supplies for volunteers. A GoFundMe campaign, initially aimed at funding the private investigator, ballooned past $60,000 as strangers across the country contributed, moved by Ivy's photo and the horror of her apparent abduction. "People want to help," a local news reporter told me during an interview 3 weeks into the search. "Your sister's story has resonated with so many people who've experienced something similar, or who simply can't imagine the horror your family is going through." I thanked every donor personally when I could, overwhelmed by generosity from strangers who had no obligation to care about a woman they'd never met. I had no idea, thanking them, that I was accepting money under false circumstances I couldn't yet comprehend. A strange lead. 6 weeks into the investigation, Griffin called me with something that struck an odd note. "I found unusual activity on one of Ivy's old email accounts," he said, one she apparently hadn't used in years, tied to a college application portal. There was a login attempt 2 weeks after her disappearance. "Could someone be trying to access her information?" I asked, my mind immediately jumping to the kidnapper theory that had anchored every assumption for the past month and a half. "Possibly," Griffin said. "Or possibly she's still alive and made a mistake logging into an old account out of habit." I dismissed the second possibility immediately, unable to reconcile it with the blood evidence, the broken window, the entire narrative I'd spent 6 weeks and my life savings building around a violent abduction. "Keep digging," I told him. "There has to be an explanation that fits what we already know happened to her." Dale Perrin surfaces. Detective Ruiz called 2 weeks later with information that shifted the entire framework of the investigation. "We've identified a man named Dale Perrin, who Ivy owed a substantial debt to," he said, nearly $90,000, accumulated through what appears to be an unregulated private lending arrangement. My stomach dropped. $90,000? She never mentioned any debt like that. "We're investigating whether Perrin or his associates may have been involved in her disappearance," Ruiz said. "Debt collection of this magnitude, through unofficial channels, sometimes escalates to exactly this kind of violence." For the first time since the search began, I felt a strange, unwelcome relief at the idea that Ivy's disappearance had a comprehensible cause, even a criminal one, rather than being random or senseless. If Dale Perrin had taken her, at least there was a specific person to find, a specific motive to understand. Interviewing Dale Perrin Ruiz brought Perrin in for questioning, and I sat in on part of the interview from behind a two-way mirror, watching a heavy-set man in his 50s answer questions with practiced, unbothered calm. "I loaned her money," Perrin said. "That's not illegal, whatever rate I charged. What happened to her after that isn't my business." "Where were you the night she disappeared?" Ruiz asked. "Home," Perrin said. "My wife can confirm it. I had no reason to hurt that girl. Hurting her doesn't get me my money back. If anything, I need her alive to pay what she owes me." His logic struck me as disturbingly sound, though it did little to ease my fear that something worse than a simple disappearance had happened to my sister. If Perrin hadn't taken her, someone else clearly had, or something even more sinister was unfolding that none of us yet understood. The first crack in the story. Griffin called me 8 weeks into the search with news that finally, definitively, cracked the narrative I'd built. "The login attempt I found earlier," he said. "I traced the IP address. It originated from a public library in Asheville, North Carolina." "Asheville," I repeated. "Why would a kidnapper be logging into Ivy's old college account from a library in North Carolina?" "That's exactly the question I couldn't stop asking myself," Griffin said. "So I dug further. There's a woman who checked into a motel in Asheville 9 days after Ivy's disappearance, using the name Iris Whitfield, paid in cash. No ID required for the type of extended stay arrangement she used." "That doesn't prove anything," I said, my voice tight with denial I could feel building even as the evidence mounted against it. "Odette," Griffin said gently, "I pulled a photograph from the motel's security footage. I need you to look at it before you say anything else." The photograph. I met Griffin at his office that same afternoon, my hands shaking as he slid a grainy printout across his desk. A woman, dark hair cut shorter than Ivy's had been, walking through a motel parking lot, her face angled slightly away from the camera, but unmistakably, devastatingly familiar. "That's her," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "That's Ivy." "I need you to understand what this means," Griffin said carefully. "If your sister checked into this motel 9 days after her disappearance, using a different name, alive and apparently unharmed, that changes everything about what actually happened to her." I sat in his office for nearly 20 minutes, staring at that photograph, feeling something shift inside me that I couldn't yet name. Not quite relief, not quite rage, something colder and more complicated than either. Confronting the blood evidence. "What about the blood in her car?" I asked finally. "The broken window. None of that fits with her simply driving away and disappearing on her own." Griffin nodded slowly. "I had a theory about that too, once I found the motel evidence. I contacted a forensic consultant privately, outside the police investigation, and asked about the possibility of staged evidence." "Staged how?" "Blood can be drawn and stored," Griffin said. "If someone planned this in advance, they could have had blood drawn weeks earlier, kept it refrigerated, then used it to stage a crime scene before disappearing. The broken window could have been done herself or with help to sell the appearance of forced entry. The pieces I'd refused to see for 2 months suddenly arranged themselves into a shape I couldn't unsee any longer. My sister hadn't been taken. She'd planned an elaborate escape from her debts, using a staged kidnapping to disappear completely, while an entire community, including me, spent everything we had searching for a version of her that had never existed." Telling Detective Ruiz I brought the evidence to Ruiz the following morning, watching his expression shift from professional concern to something closer to controlled fury as he processed what Griffin had uncovered. "If this is accurate," Ruiz said, "your sister has committed multiple crimes here. False reporting of a crime, insurance or fraud implications depending on how the crowdfunding money was structured, and potentially identity theft if she used someone else's identity to establish a new life." "Identity theft?" I asked. "The name on the motel registration, Iris Whitfield," Ruiz said. "I ran it through our database. There's a woman by that name who died 3 years ago in a car accident in West Virginia. No close family, minimal digital footprint. If your sister assumed that identity, it wouldn't have been difficult to construct a plausible new life around a name that essentially belonged to no one anymore." I felt sick, imagining Ivy researching dead women with no family, no one to notice if their identity suddenly resurfaced somewhere new. Finding Ivy Ruiz's team traced the motel activity further, eventually identifying a rental property outside Asheville, where a woman matching Ivy's description had signed a 6-month lease under the name Iris Whitfield, 3 weeks after her disappearance. I insisted on being present when they made contact, despite Ruiz's reservations about the emotional volatility of the situation. "I need to see her," I told him. "I need to hear this from her directly, not through a police report." We arrived at a modest rental house on a quiet street outside Asheville on a gray Tuesday morning, nearly 3 months after Ivy's disappearance began. Ruiz knocked. A woman answered, dark hair cut into an unfamiliar bob, but the eyes, the exact shape and color of our mother's eyes, were unmistakably my sister's. "Odie," Ivy said, her voice breaking immediately, all pretense of the identity she'd constructed crumbling the moment she saw me standing on her porch. "How could you do this?" I asked, my voice shaking with an anger I'd been suppressing for weeks, ever since Griffin showed me that photograph. "How could you let everyone believe you were dead or taken? How could you let me spend everything I had searching for you?" Ivy's face collapsed into tears. "I didn't know what else to do," she said. "Parents' people were getting more aggressive. I was terrified they'd actually kill me if I didn't pay. I panicked. I made a plan, and once I started it, I didn't know how to stop it without everyone finding out how badly I'd screwed up my entire life. So you staged your own kidnapping," I said, "using blood you drew from yourself, using a dead woman's identity, using every dollar I had saved for 11 years to fund a search for a crime that never happened." Ruiz stepped forward at that point, informing Ivy of her rights, the reality of the situation settling over all of us, with the particular heaviness of consequences finally arriving. The legal aftermath. Ivy was charged with filing a false police report, fraud related to the crowdfunding campaign, and identity theft for her use of Iris Whitfield's name and social security information, obtained apparently through documents she'd found through a genealogy research site that had exposed more personal information than the deceased woman's family had ever realized was publicly accessible. The identity theft charge is the most serious, our family's attorney explained during a difficult meeting weeks later. Using a deceased person's identity to establish new financial accounts, sign leases, and avoid detection carries significant federal implications beyond the state charges for the false report. Ivy pled guilty to reduced charges in exchange for cooperation regarding Dale Perrin's unregulated lending operation, testimony that ultimately helped authorities build a separate case against Perrin for operating an illegal lending scheme with predatory interest rates targeting financially vulnerable individuals. "At least something good might come out of this mess," my mother said during one of the hearings, though her voice carried little conviction behind the sentiment. The donors. The hardest part, harder even than confronting Ivy directly, was facing the community that had donated over $60,000, believing they were helping find a kidnapping victim. I made the decision, against some advice suggesting I could simply let the story quietly fade, to post a full public statement explaining exactly what had happened, along with a commitment to refund every donor personally, using whatever remained of my own savings and whatever Ivy could eventually repay through a court-ordered restitution plan. "I understand if this feels like a betrayal," I wrote in the statement, because it was, to all of you and to me. I was deceived just as thoroughly as everyone who donated. I'm committed to making this right, dollar by dollar, however long it takes. The response was mixed. Some donors were understanding, recognizing my own victimization in the situation. Others were furious, feeling exploited by a family drama they genuinely believed was a life-or-death emergency. "You have every right to be angry," I told one particularly upset donor who confronted me at a local grocery store. "I'm angry too. I just also happen to be her sister, which means I'm stuck untangling this mess whether I want to or not." Rebuilding trust with my family. My parents struggled more than I expected with the aftermath, oscillating between relief that Ivy was alive and a particular kind of grief for the sister and daughter who'd apparently been capable of this level of sustained deception without any of us noticing the warning signs. I keep replaying every conversation we had before she disappeared, my mother told me one evening, sitting in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd once organized search party logistics on a whiteboard, now stored in the garage. Looking for something I should have caught, some sign I missed. I don't think there was anything obvious to catch, I said. She hid it well because she was terrified, not because any of us failed her. That distinction matters, even if it doesn't make this hurt any less. My father, quieter than usual throughout the entire ordeal, finally spoke his mind during a family dinner months later. "I don't know how to forgive this," he said. "Not yet. Maybe not for a long time." "I don't think forgiveness has to happen on any particular timeline," I told him. "I'm still figuring out what I feel, too." Ivy's sentencing. Ivy received a sentence of 18 months, reduced from a much harsher potential outcome due to her cooperation in the parent investigation, along with a lengthy probation period and a court-mandated restitution schedule, requiring her to repay both the crowdfunding donations and the costs I'd personally incurred during the search. "I know saying sorry doesn't undo any of this," she told me during a visit early into her sentence, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I don't expect you to just move past it because I'm apologizing." "I don't expect myself to move past it quickly either," I said. "But I also don't want to spend the rest of my life only being your sister through the lens of what you did this year. I need time. I think we both do." Where the money went. My 11 years of savings, meant for a home down payment Theo and I had been planning toward for years, were largely depleted by the search efforts before Ivy's true situation came to light. The restitution schedule, court-ordered but dependent on Ivy actually earning income during and after her incarceration, promised repayment over an estimated decade, assuming everything went according to plan. "We're starting over," Theo told me gently one evening, reviewing our finances with the particular patience he'd shown throughout the entire ordeal. "It's not where we hope to be by now, but we're starting over together, which counts for something." "I know this cost us both something we can't easily get back," I said. "I don't know how to make that right beyond just working toward it again." "We will," Theo said. "It'll just take longer than we planned." A complicated kind of love. I visit Ivy in prison every few months, the drive giving me time to sort through emotions that still don't resolve into anything simple. I love my sister. I'm also still, months later, deeply angry at her, in a way that coexists uncomfortably alongside that love, rather than replacing it. "I keep thinking about how scared you must have been," I told her during one recent visit, "to believe faking your own kidnapping was a better option than telling any of us the truth about the debt." "I was ashamed," Ivy said. "More ashamed than scared, honestly, at least at first. The fear came later, once parents' people started actually threatening me. By then, I'd already convinced myself the only way out was disappearing entirely." "You could have come to me," I said, "before any of this. I would have helped you figure something out, even if it meant hard conversations." "I know that now," Ivy said. "I didn't believe it then. I thought disappearing would hurt everyone less than the truth would. What I know now." People sometimes ask if I regret spending my entire savings searching for a kidnapping that never happened. I don't. Not in the way they expect. I regret the deception that made that spending necessary. I don't regret choosing to search for my sister with everything I had, believing, as I did at the time, that her life depended on it. What I've learned, slowly and painfully, is that shame metastasizes in silence, in ways that eventually become far more destructive than whatever truth someone is trying to avoid. Ivy's debt, left unspoken, grew into a fabricated kidnapping that cost an entire community trust, cost our family months of genuine terror, and cost me a financial foundation I'd spent over a decade building. Where we are now. Ivy has served 8 months of her sentence as of this writing, with 10 remaining. She writes to me weekly, letters that have slowly shifted from justification and fear toward something that reads more like genuine accountability, though I remain cautious about trusting that shift completely until I see it sustained beyond the walls of a prison that limits how much choice she actually has right now. Teo and I are rebuilding our savings, slower than before, but steadily. The home we once imagined feels further away than it used to, but not impossible, just delayed by a detour neither of us asked for. Some nights, I still think about that photograph Griffin showed me. My sister walking through a motel parking lot, alive and unharmed, while an entire town searched wooded roads, believing she'd been taken by force. I think about the particular cruelty of allowing people who loved her to grieve a version of events specifically designed to be more bearable than the truth, when the truth, however difficult, would have at least been honest. I don't know exactly what our relationship looks like once she's released. I know I'll show up, the way I always have, because that's simply who I am in this family. But showing up doesn't mean pretending the last year didn't happen. It means learning to hold both things at once, the sister I love and the woman capable of letting me believe she might be dead rather than admitting she was simply, desperately afraid.